Hey everyone, this is Karenology. You won't believe the insane drama that just unfolded. Let's get into it. He stood at my gate like he owned the damn place. Tan boots, mirrored sunglasses, a shiny badge that caught the sun just right. Too right, if you asked me. Everything about him was too clean. No dust on his pants, no sweat on his brow, even though it was already 80 degrees and climbing. Out here, real men sweat. Real officers don't roll up alone, wearing off-the-shelf gear and a swagger borrowed from bad TV. Federal business, Gyanas, he barked. Step aside. I didn't move. I had a wrench in one hand and half a carburetor in the other. I'd been working on the old tractor since sunrise, and my back reminded me every minute that I wasn't 30 anymore. But I stood tall. A badge, I said. He flashed it quick, like a magician's trick. But I saw it. Not a federal badge. A replica, plastic sheen, edges too rounded, and the seal was from the wrong department. Worse, he wore it on a chain around his neck. No real Fed does that. Get off my land, I said. He stepped forward like he thought he could intimidate me. Wrong day, wrong man. I let the carburetor fall with a clang and moved faster than I thought I still could. Swung the gate shut right as he reached it and caught his wrist between the bars. He yelled. I didn't let go. I cheat. You have 5 seconds to disappear, I said, my voice low. Or I take your elbow too. He yanked himself free and stumbled back, face red with fury. You'll regret this, he spit. Not as much as you will if you come back. He took off in a puff of gravel. I stood there watching the dust trail disappear down the road, heart hammering in my chest. Not from fear, from memory. See? I used to be a federal marshal. 30 years of tracking liars, smugglers, men with badges and no souls. I'd seen this act before, just never on my land. I didn't think it was over. I just didn't know how deep it would go. The next day, I found my name in the paper. Local man questioned in disappearance of neighbor, and just like that, the fuse was lit. It started with a knock. A real one this time. 3 men in plain clothes, badges out, polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They asked if I'd seen Karen Dalton. I said no. Truth was, I hadn't seen her since she screamed at me over the fence about my dog barking. That was 3 weeks back. She hasn't been heard from in a few days, one of them said. We're following up on all local contacts. I could tell they weren't just checking boxes. One of them had a tablet, already open to a profile page. My face. My record. My military and federal service. My old address in Arizona. You're not under investigation, they said. Just routine. I've lived long enough to know when I'm being lied to. That night, a different kind of silence settled over my place. Not peaceful, watchful, the kind of quiet you get before a thunderstorm, when even the birds go still. I sat on the porch with a shotgun I hadn't touched in years and stared at the tree line, waiting. 3 days later, I lost my job at the school. They didn't say why, didn't need to. Then came the whispers in town. People crossing the street when I walked by. Daughters pulling their kids away from me in the grocery store. Mags, the cashier I'd known since she was in braces, wouldn't even meet my eye. That's when I knew. Someone wasn't just trying to scare me. They were trying to erase me. You don't spend decades hunting men through deserts and swamps without learning to smell a setup. And this stank worse than anything I'd seen in 20 years. Problem was, I couldn't prove a damn thing. Yet. The funny thing about fear is how quiet it is. It doesn't scream. It doesn't bang on your door. It seeps. A neighbor stops waving. Your mail starts arriving late. The sheriff, who used to nod at you from his cruiser, now stares just a little too long. And you start to wonder if you're going crazy or if the whole damn town's decided you're already guilty. 3 days after the article, I caught a pair of teenagers at the edge of my property. One held a phone out, recording. The other whispered something I didn't catch, but it ended in a snicker. I stepped onto the porch, didn't say a word, just looked at them. They ran. Didn't matter. The video made it online anyway. Ex-Marshal still loose near missing woman's home. They used a shot from 10 years ago, from a training camp in Texas. I had a rifle over my shoulder and a scowl that could split wood. Out of context, I looked exactly like what they wanted me to be. Dangerous, unstable, guilty. My daughter Maggie called that night. Dad, what's going on? People are sending me videos. Are you okay? She sounded scared. Not for me, for herself. For what this might do to her life, her kids. I told her to stay away, just in case things got worse. She cried. I didn't. I couldn't afford to. The next morning, someone nailed a sign to my fence. Where is Karen? Spray painted in red. All caps. Sloppy and fast. I ripped it down, burned it in the fire pit out back, and stood there long after the flames died. The ash smelled like rubber and hate. That night, I heard footsteps. Subtle, careful, but not animal. Human. I cut the porch light and sat in the dark. Watched as a figure moved past the old truck. Another near the barn. They didn't come to talk. They weren't from the law. These were watchers, not questioners. I pulled out an old trail camera from the garage, set it up in the pine line. Next day, nothing. Not a blur, not a shadow. Whoever they were, they knew what they were doing. I started digging. Karen Dalton had a boyfriend. Name wasn't on the lease, but I remembered him from a BBQ last year. Smooth talker, white teeth, too many rings on his fingers, the kind of man who uses charm like a crowbar. I drove to her old address an hour out near Hillsborough. A mailbox stood crooked at the end of a weeded drive. The place was empty. Neighbors weren't friendly. One of them finally told me she'd left with some developer guy a while back. Bought a new home outright in cash. That caught my attention. I started pulling records. Construction permits. Zoning proposals. A name came up more than once. Jared Walton. Local contractor. Known for flipping properties and pushing low-income families out for high-end builds. And guess whose land he'd tried to buy last spring? Mine. He showed up at my door with a folder and a fake grin. Offered me double market value. I told him no, not interested. He called me old-fashioned. I called him something I won't repeat. That was the last I saw of him. Until now, Karen and Jared. Together. She vanishes. I get framed. My land becomes a target. I smelled the setup a mile away now. But suspicion isn't proof. And proof? That's what I needed. I went back through my own camera logs. Not the trail cam. The security feed from my shed. I hadn't checked it in weeks. There, buried between a windy Tuesday and a raccoon fight, was a clip. Karen. Standing on my porch, holding something in her hands, she never knocked. Just stood there, then left. Timestamp 2:41 a.m. 2 nights before the article dropped, I zoomed in. In her hands was a metal box. Familiar. I kept one like it in the shed. Locked. And it was missing now. I didn't know what was in that box. Papers, maybe. Photos. But whatever it was, it made me a suspect, and someone wanted me buried under that suspicion. That night, I didn't sleep. I cleaned my tools. I oiled the hinges on every door. And I locked the gate. Not because I was scared. Because I was planning. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. But it'd be my kind of war. Silent, slow, and surgical. Next stop? City Hall. Not to talk, to watch. Because Jared Walton had a new proposal going up for vote next week, and I wanted to see who shook his hand. City Hall didn't look like much. Beige bricks, bad parking, and that smell of mildew that clung to every government building between here and the Mississippi. But it wasn't about the walls. It was about what happened inside. I showed up an hour early and sat in the back row of the community chamber, arms crossed, cap pulled low. Nobody noticed me. That was the idea. Jared Walton arrived 10 minutes before the meeting. Tan suit, brown shoes, hair slicked like he just stepped out of a commercial. He moved like a man already approved. His assistant trailed behind him, lugging a presentation board and one of those projector things that fancy folks think makes them look credible. I watched every handshake, every smile, every nod from the council members. It was all rehearsed. His proposal was for a rural revitalization zone. In plain English, that meant kicking folks like me off our land and replacing our homes with boutique cabins, yoga studios, and overpriced coffee huts. The map he held up had little pastel bubbles marked Phase 1. My land was right in the middle. They didn't call it mine. They called it Undeveloped Green Zone. And they didn't say I'd be forced to sell. They said there would be adjustments. I've hunted men through swamps darker than midnight. I've stared down drug runners who had nothing to lose. But something about seeing my home reduced to a colored circle on a board, that rattled me more than I expected. I left before the vote, didn't need to hear it. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, with the lights off and the papers from Jared's last visit spread in front of me. My land, my boundaries, his plan. I circled the overlap, measured the access road they'd need. It ran straight through the old tree line behind my barn, and then it hit me. If they couldn't buy me, they'd find a reason to remove me. And if Karen had planted something on my land, something dangerous, illegal, or even just questionable enough to justify a raid, they could take it all. I called Maggie, told her to bring the boys up next weekend, but not to tell anyone. I told her we'd have a cookout, maybe go fishing. She hesitated, but said yes. I didn't tell her that I was clearing out everything valuable from the house that night, just in case. The next day, a black SUV parked down the road. Didn't move for 6 hours. No plates. By sundown, I was digging. Not metaphorically, literally. Behind the shed, near the old well where the ground stayed soft. I figured if Karen had planted something, it'd be there. Easy access, away from the cameras. 3 hours later, I hit metal. It was a box, not mine. Small, gray, locked tight. I didn't open it there. I took it inside, put it on the workbench, and stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to dump it in the river. Let the whole mess float away. But I knew better. I cracked it open with a crowbar. Inside were papers, flash drives, a burner phone, and, God help me, a bag of white powder. Labeled, measured, photographed. That was it. That was the frame job. They planted drugs on my land, recorded proof of it, maybe even tipped off someone to come find it. It wasn't just about taking my home. It was about burying me so deep no one would ask questions. I sat down and read everything. The documents were detailed. Transaction logs, fake names, notes that painted a picture of a man running a trafficking ring out of a rural barn. My barn. I recognized one name, Jack Toller. Used to be sheriff 2 towns over. Got fired last year for conduct unbecoming. No one knew the details. But here he was again, mentioned 3 times, tied to both Karen and Jared. That connected a cop to this mess, and that changed everything. I had to act, quietly, deliberately. The next morning, I drove 2 counties over to see a man I hadn't talked to in years. His name was Curtis Bell, former U.S. Marshal like me, retired, lived in a trailer on the edge of nowhere. We served together in New Mexico. Back then, he was the best damn bloodhound I'd ever seen. Curtis didn't ask questions. He just looked at the box, whistled, and said, "You stepped in something deep." I nodded. Question is, how do I step out without losing my boots? Curtis poured us coffee that tasted like gasoline and started making calls. He didn't say who he was calling. Didn't need to. All I knew was, whatever storm was coming, I wasn't going to face it alone. Not anymore. And if Jared Walton thought he'd scared me into silence, he hadn't met the old me yet, the one I'd buried years ago, but was starting to dig back up. Curtis didn't waste time. He worked like the clock was ticking louder than we could hear. First thing he did was pull out a battered laptop that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Bush administration and started digging through his old contact lists. I watched as names popped up. Former deputies, retired intel analysts, even 1 or 2 journalists that didn't play nice with big money anymore. He didn't say much, just grunted, cursed, and typed like a man stitching together a net from memory. I gave him everything. The fake badge incident, Karen's late-night visit, the box I'd found buried near the shed, Jared's proposal at City Hall. He listened with those sharp eyes of his, nodding now and then, until I finished. You know what this is?" he said finally, leaning back in his creaking chair. Enlighten me. "Aunt, this is a real estate heist. But they're not stealing property. They're stealing identity, story, reputation. They make you the problem, so when you vanish, nobody asks why." He wasn't wrong. The old me would have kicked indoors by now. But age teaches patience, and the fact I hadn't already been arrested meant they weren't done playing yet. Curtis handed me a flash drive. "This has the phone numbers from the burner." I decrypted them. Don't ask how. I didn't. 2 of the numbers were burner to burner. Clean loops, but one stood out. It was still active. Curtis smiled like a man seeing a pattern he'd hoped wasn't there. "It's local, registered to a property management firm in Harlan County." "You recognize the name?" I did. "Walton Holdings." So now it was official. The phone Karen left had a direct link to Jared's company. Curtis leaned in. We're not taking this to the cops. They're either in on it or being used. We're gonna flip it from the inside. Flip it how? He smiled. We give 'em a story they can't resist. That night we staged a break-in. Curtis knew of an abandoned hunting cabin just outside town. We parked my truck nearby and made it look like I'd run. Left signs of a scuffle in the barn, some shattered glass, even a blood trail made from animal liver he bought at a gas station. It stank like hell. Made my stomach turn, which was the point. We wanted them to think I panicked, that I broke. 2 days later, it worked. News spread. Former federal marshal missing. Signs of violence? Possible suicide. It wasn't on every channel, but the local gossip circles caught fire. And with me gone, the real players started moving again. Curtis had a buddy in the utility company. Set up a trace on incoming calls to Jared's development site. In less than 24 hours, they got a ping from someone using the same burner network as Karen's phone. The call lasted 3 minutes, then disconnected. Curtis tracked the signal to a storage unit on the edge of town, unregistered, paid in cash, no cameras. We went that night. It was quiet. Too quiet. I felt the old tension in my spine. Like stepping into a house where someone's still inside, but not talking. Curtis picked the lock. We slipped in. Inside, there were 3 metal shelves, paper files, flash drives, photos, a map of the town with red circles around certain houses. Mine was circled 3 times, but that wasn't what made my blood run cold. There was a wall of photos, surveillance stills, me, Maggie, my grandsons, the school where I worked, the diner, the local VFW. They'd been watching us for months. Curtis opened a drawer, pulled out a folder marked Transition Phase 2. Inside was a typed memo. The language was coded, but the meaning was clear. Once I was discredited or removed, the land would be acquired via eminent domain justification through security risk designation. In other words, frame me, then claim me. I took the file, not to run to the police, but to show someone I hadn't seen in years. Dale Cormack, town assessor, ex-Navy. Quiet man, but with a spine. We served in adjacent units once. He didn't owe me anything, but he remembered. I met him early the next morning in the parking lot behind the grain store. He took one look at the folder, and his jaw tightened. They're going to try to fast-track this, he muttered. Public notice, emergency vote. They'll post it with 24-hour lead time, if that. Then we've got less than 2 days. He nodded. You need to disappear again. I just did. He looked at me, eyes narrowing. You got something planned, don't you? I smiled. Yeah, I said. And this time, I'm not hiding. By dawn, I was already moving. The plan wasn't perfect. Hell, it wasn't even safe. But I didn't need perfect. I needed pressure. Something loud enough to rattle cages, but quiet enough to stay beneath official radar. Jared had built his empire on pretense. I was going to light a match underneath it. Curtis stayed at the cabin, keeping the illusion alive. He'd leak a few breadcrumbs online, make it look like I'd left town and gone unstable. People believe anything when it confirms their fears. My job was different now. I was the ghost in the machine. First stop, the Community Records Office. The one Jared's company used for filing rezoning requests. Dale had tipped me off. There was a recent amendment signed under my name. It authorized a temporary easement across my southern property line. Thing is, I never signed it. And the signature? It was damn close to mine, but not mine. Forgery. I didn't take the document. I photographed it. Every page, including the witness signature. Someone named Rachel Fenner. That name meant nothing to me then, but it would. Back at the cabin, I showed Curtis the pictures. He took one look and nodded. We got him. He dug into Rachel Fenner. She wasn't a notary, not a clerk. She worked for Walton Holdings, on the books as a compliance consultant. In reality, she was the one who made paperwork look legal. I started making a list. A real one. Not for the cops, for leverage. Rachel Fenner, Jared Walton, Jack Toller. I had dots. Now I needed lines to connect them. We set up a meeting with a contact Curtis had in insurance fraud investigations. A guy named Andy Kellum. Mid-50s, balding, smelled like coffee grounds and permanent marker. He worked claims on construction firms and had a personal grudge against Jared. Turns out Jared once burned foundation deal that cost Andy six-figure payout. Andy didn't need convincing. He needed access. I gave him the photos, the flash drive from the storage unit, the easement form. He nearly salivated. This is enough to open a federal file, he said. Then open it. He paused. You understand what happens once I do? I become real again. Yeah, and they'll know it. That night, I returned home. I waited until dark, then slipped onto my own land like a stranger. Everything felt wrong. The porch light was out, even though I always left it on for Maggie. The back gate was unlocked, and there were footprints in the dirt. Boots I didn't recognize. I didn't go inside. Instead, I circled to the barn and climbed into the hayloft. From there, I had a full view of the house. I stayed there all night, shotgun across my chest, heart thudding like a war drum. Nothing happened. But the feeling didn't leave. In the morning, I entered slowly, room by room. They'd been here. Drawers opened. Cabinets shifted. Not ransacked. Searched. Carefully. Curtis arrived mid-morning with a burner phone. Kellum sent this. You need to hear it. He pressed play. The voice was unmistakable. Jared, make sure the Marshal's name is off every document. Fenner can fix the gaps. We don't need heat from this. He's already off the map. If he shows up again, we'll handle it. A pause. Then another voice. Deeper. Rougher. He's not going to show up. We're watching the daughter now. Curtis paused the playback. My jaw clenched so hard I felt a tendon pop in my neck. They were watching Maggie. That was it. The line. Everything I'd done, every step back, every measured move burned up in that moment. They could come after me, frame me, destroy my name, but they touched my daughter. That was war. I told Curtis we were going public, but not in the way they expected. No interviews, no calls to the sheriff, no press conference. We were going to make Jared Walton confess, not by force, by fear. Curtis knew a guy in set design. Used to build fake crime scenes for training drills. In one night, we turned the old barn into something that looked like a federal field office. Desks, paperwork, whiteboards, badges, the whole 9 yards. Then we leaked just enough to reach Jared's assistant. Not directly. Through a whisper chain, one of Andy's old insurance contacts, who told a contractor, who told a supplier, who told a temp at Walton Holdings. Within 48 hours, Jared was sniffing around. He thought I was gone. He was wrong. When he came up the drive that Friday afternoon, all smiles and fake concern, I was sitting on the porch. Shotgun propped beside me. Coffee steaming. "You're alive," he said. No thanks to you." His face twitched. "Just for a second. Mind if we talk?" "Talk loud. I don't hear so well anymore." He stepped up like he was walking into a trap. Because he was. Everything about his posture screamed calculation. But his eyes kept darting toward the barn. "Someone said you were working with the feds." "Funny thing," I said, sipping my coffee. "Someone said the same about you." He didn't smile. I stood up. Walked past him. Let the door to the barn swing open just enough for him to see the setup inside. Desks, files, a corkboard with his photo in the center. He paled. "You should leave," I said. "Now." He didn't argue. Just got in his truck and drove away too fast. Curtis stepped out of the trees a minute later. That was bold," he said. Just wait," I answered. "He's not scared of us. He's scared of what we might know. And now he thinks we know everything. Let him sweat." The days that followed weren't quiet. They were sharp. Every knock on the door made my hand twitch toward the shotgun. Every unfamiliar car slowing down out front made my chest tighten. I wasn't just waiting for the next move. I was daring them to make it. Curtis kept watch from the ridge behind the barn. He had a radio, binoculars, and a thermos of coffee, so strong it probably violated Geneva Conventions. We didn't talk much. We just listened, waited, watched. And Jared? He cracked faster than I expected. 2 nights after his visit, a white SUV pulled into the church parking lot across the street. Curtis spotted it. Same plates from Jared's private fleet. This time, he wasn't alone. Rachel Fenner sat in the passenger seat. They were arguing. Curtis snapped photos through the scope. You could see it in their faces. Panic, blame, fear. Rachel shoved a folder at him. He threw it back. Then he hit the steering wheel. Hard. The next day, Walton Holdings filed a sudden permit withdrawal for the entire Phase 1 zone. On paper, it looked like a pivot. In reality, it was retreat. But I wasn't done. They'd tried to erase me. Tried to pin a crime on me, ruin my name, and weaponize my past against my future. And they would have succeeded, if not for one slip. They underestimated how many people still owed me favors. Remember Rachel Fenner, the compliance consultant? Turns out she had a brother. And that brother, Curtis found him. Lives out in Iron Creek. Runs a used car lot and a gambling ring on the side. Not exactly clean. Curtis paid him a visit. Didn't threaten. Didn't even ask for much. Just mentioned Rachel's name, then slid a photo across the desk. One taken the night she handed Jared that folder. I don't care what you owe her," Curtis said. "But you make sure she gets the message. The Marshal's not just alive. He's rebuilding." By the end of that week, Rachel emailed me. No greeting, no name, just one line. They paid me to forge it. I didn't know the rest. Attached was a file. Dozens of scanned contracts, internal memos, communications between Jared and Jack Toller. Some of them were dated over a year back. Proof that I was just the latest in a string of removals. They'd done this before. Framed a man in Fayetteville. Accused a woman of code violations until she lost her property in a forced auction. And in both cases, Walton Holdings acquired the land weeks later. This was a machine, and I'd seen enough machines to know if you want to break them, you don't punch the gears. You pull the pin. The pin was Jack. Jack Toller had a reputation that didn't survive sunlight. Fired sheriff. Bar fights. One lawsuit pending from an ex-wife and another from a tenant he tried to evict by cutting power during winter. Still, he held sway. Enough that people like Jared kept him close. So I made him my target. Curtis tracked his pattern. Bar on Highway 19 on Tuesdays. Cheap diner on Thursdays. Always alone. Always armed. He was a creature of habit and ego. The kind that bragged to strangers just to hear himself sound important. I posed as a land investor from out of state. Bought a burner phone. Made a few calls to a broker Jared used. Let it slip. I wanted someone off the books to help me secure land. Jack called me the next day. Name's Toller. I make things easier. He didn't recognize my voice. Too cocky, too sure. We met at the diner. I wore sunglasses, a ball cap, and my best fake southern drawl. He laid it all out. How he could redirect inspections, move timelines, and discourage squatters. I asked how much. Depends who we're clearing. What if it's someone like a Marshal? He paused, looked up, smirked. Already done that once. Curtis was at the next booth over. Recorded everything. That night, I sent the file to Rachel. One line. Insurance. In case you grow a conscience. By now, Jared was unraveling. His firm stopped answering calls. His last assistant quit. Maggie said someone was parked across from her house for 6 hours until a neighbor knocked on their window with a tire iron. They didn't come back. Good. Let him feel hunted for a change. But it wasn't over. Not yet. I wanted more than revenge. I wanted to make sure this couldn't happen again. And to do that, I needed the one person Jared trusted most. His sister, Emily Walton, CFO of the company. Quiet, meticulous, rarely seen in public, and the real brains behind the curtain. I didn't plan to threaten her. I planned to give her a choice, because when the walls start falling, the ones with the ledger books are always the first to flip. I just needed to knock on the right door. And this time, I wasn't bringing a shotgun. I was bringing truth and leverage. I found Emily Walton exactly where I expected her to be. Behind a glass wall, in a minimalist office overlooking a lake that didn't belong to her. The building was newer than sense. All steel beams and modern silence. You could hear your own heartbeat in the lobby. It was the kind of place people built to hide money, not make it. I didn't call ahead, didn't schedule. I walked in with a file folder under my arm and a determination in my gut that hadn't settled since the first time Jared smiled at me. The receptionist tried to stop me. I didn't stop walking. Emily looked up as I entered. She was younger than Jared by maybe 10 years. Blazer sharp enough to slice paper. Eyes flat. Cold. Calculating. You can't be here? She said, rising. I'm already here, I said. And we're going to talk. I'll call security. Go ahead. But once they see what's in this folder, you won't be the one giving orders. She hesitated. That was all I needed. I set the folder down, opened it just enough for her to see the header on the top page. Internal Property Acquisition Plan. Confidential. Her mouth tightened. Sit down, I said. To her credit, she did. I didn't bluff. I showed her everything. The forged documents, the photos of Jared and Rachel, the audio from Jack, the emails Rachel had sent me, including the one implicating Emily herself. Softly, indirectly, but enough to bury her in an investigation. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she asked the only question that mattered. What do you want? I want my name cleared. Publicly. I want the land deal dissolved. All of them. I want an internal statement issued to every associate you've ever worked with, confirming that Walton Holdings acted unethically. I want the machine dismantled. She stared at me, calculating risk, angles, loss. Hey, you could take this to the press, Charles, she said. Sure, I said, but you'd survive that. You'd just restructure, rename, rebuild. No. I want you to burn this thing down from the inside, yourself. And if I don't, I leak it all. But not to the news. To every single property owner your company ever tried to move against. To every rival contractor. Every ethical board. I'll hand it off to people with grudges and nowhere to be. People who don't care about laws, just payback. She flinched. Barely. But enough. You want revenge, she said? No, I said. I want insurance. Revenge is emotional. This is structural. That landed. She nodded slowly. It'll take time. You've got 48 hours. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm still standing. And Jared's not. I left without shaking her hand. Curtis was waiting in the truck. I slid in. Didn't speak for a full minute. Well? He asked. She's thinking. And that's all we needed. We drove home in silence. The air felt different now, less charged, like the storm had passed. But the wreckage hadn't been counted yet. The next day, Maggie called. They stopped watching the house, she said. Boys went outside for the first time in a week. Thanks, Dad. I didn't answer right away. My throat was tight. Just keep the doors locked, I finally said. A storm can blow back around. That night, a courier dropped off a package. Inside was a single sheet of paper, signed and sealed by Walton Holdings. Full withdrawal from all active rural development projects. Pending independent audit. Attached. A prepared statement for local media. Not perfect, not public enough. But it was a start. 2 hours later, I received an email from Rachel. I'm out, leaving town. Don't contact me again. Attached was one last file. It wasn't about me. It was about the family in Fayetteville. The first ones Jared had moved against. Names, documents, even a settlement agreement buried in legal sludge. I sent it to Andy Kellum with a message. Ease and sales. Time to go wide. Curtis grinned when I told him. It's like cutting a snake in half, he said. Both ends still wiggle for a while. Then we keep stomping, I said. He poured us each a glass of bad bourbon. We toasted without words, because it wasn't over. But the shadows had started to run from the light, and Emily Walton had just become our unlikely fuse. Next came the fire. The thing about pulling out weeds is this. Unless you get the root, they grow back. Walton Holdings was crumbling, yes. But a collapse in paperwork didn't mean justice. It meant silence. And I'd lived through enough government cleanups to know silence is where rot grows back in. So we went hunting. Andy Kellum. Bless the bastard. Took Rachel's file and ran with it. He traced the Fayetteville scam to a shell company based out of Delaware. Standard smokescreen. But there was one signature that hadn't been scrubbed. A leasing agent named Benjamin Rusk. On paper, he was a nobody. In reality, he was a middleman. And middlemen always talk when the fire gets close. Curtis tracked him to a golf resort in Missouri. We didn't fly. We drove 48 hours in a rusted-out truck with a busted air conditioner, and 2 ex-marshals trying not to kill each other over country radio. When we got there, Rusk recognized Curtis the moment he stepped out. Froze like a possum under headlights. We didn't threaten him. We offered him an exit. You flip on Jared and his people, I said. You walk away clean. You stay quiet. We bury you in every settlement you've ever doctored. He folded fast. Gave us names, dates, even a burner laptop with archived contracts. But the most important thing he gave us? Access to Jared's ghost accounts. Through those, we found proof of payouts. 2 state inspectors, 1 county zoning clerk, and even a retired judge who helped fast-track eminent domain designations. It was bigger than we thought, but here's the twist. None of it mattered. Unless we did something with it. I didn't want this to end in a press circus. Didn't want it buried under litigation. I wanted consequence. Something the people who'd been hurt could feel. That's when Curtis had the idea. A public meeting. Not city council. Not a courtroom. A town hall. Unofficial. Open air. At the old farmer's market site. The kind of place where truth spreads faster than fire. We printed everything. Laid it out on long folding tables. Folders with names, maps, scanned memos, emails. Even photos of every property stolen or pressured. No speeches, no soapboxes, just evidence. And people came. At first, it was a trickle. Curious retirees. A few young couples. Then it was a wave. Families who'd lost land. Business owners pushed out. Veterans like me who'd smelled the stink but couldn't name it. Some folks cried. Some cursed. A few just stared. Then, slowly, stories started to pour out. One woman talked about being fined out of her home. A man described being evicted over a noise complaint that never existed. It was like pulling nails out of a coffin. Painful, but necessary. Word spread. So did the files. By sunset, copies were being driven to 3 neighboring counties. We never called the media, but they showed up anyway. One reporter from a local radio station walked up to me with a recorder. "Are you the man behind this?" "No," I said. "I'm just the man they tried to bury." She smiled. "That makes you the Roots." That night, Emily Walton called. Her voice was flat, cold. "You're going to ruin us." "No," I said. "You already did that. I'm just turning on the lights." She hung up. The next day, Walton Holdings froze all accounts. Jared vanished. Rumors said he flew to Canada. Jack Toller was picked up on unrelated charges in another county, drunk and ranting about conspiracies. Typical. Curtis and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set, like we were waiting for a verdict. He finally spoke. "You think it'll stick?" "No," I said. "But it'll scar." And that was enough, until I got the letter. No return address, just my name. Inside was a photo. Me, Maggie, the boys, taken through a window. Recent. Underneath, in neat print, "Some ghosts don't vanish. They wait." Curtis read it. Didn't flinch. "You ready to end this for good?" I folded the photo. Put it in my jacket. I'm ready to make them wish they'd never started. Because they didn't just come after my land. They came after my blood. And I had one card left to play. The one they never saw coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. from clarity. The kind of cold, precise awareness you get right before a storm rolls in. That letter wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. A reminder that for all the noise we'd made, the people behind this still believed they held the leash. They didn't. The next morning, I made one call. Not to the sheriff, not to Curtis, to the Department of the Interior. See, 6 months before all this began, Jared had offered to buy not just my property, but the stretch of land that backed into the conservation buffer zone. Claimed he had plans to restore the woods. Talked about eco-initiatives and federal grants. It sounded too smooth then. Now I knew why. They weren't trying to flip rural homes for cabins. They were trying to connect parcels, to create a corridor, one that would give them federal matching funds under a land consolidation clause buried in a legislative loophole. But here's the kicker. If one property owner within that zone could prove fraudulent acquisition on a linked plot, the entire deal becomes a federal case of land misappropriation. So, I gathered everything. The forged documents, the photos, the Fayetteville files, Rachel's emails, Jack's voice recordings, and a notarized affidavit from Emily Walton, sent 2 days earlier in what I assumed was a last-ditch effort to save herself from prosecution. I packaged it all and sent it by courier. Then I waited. Curtis asked me what I expected. Nothing, I said, and that's the beauty of it. See, I knew the feds. They don't knock down doors unless it benefits them. But land fraud, federal grant abuse, that's not just dirty. That's embarrassing. And the one thing bureaucracies hate more than corruption is scandal. 3 weeks later, I got the call, not from the department. Era stat di Itain, from Jared. He was calling from a blocked number, but I knew the voice. Hoarse. Panicked. Smaller than I remembered. You win, he said. No, I replied. You lost. There's a difference. Silence. Then, almost a whisper, they're coming after me. You don't understand. Oh, I understand just fine. I ended the call. 2 days later, federal agents showed up at Walton Holdings headquarters. Offices sealed. Devices seized. Emily Walton was escorted out in a coat over her head. The news called it an ongoing investigation into environmental grant fraud. I just called it closure. Maggie brought the boys up that weekend. We grilled out back. The trees looked greener somehow, like they'd survived something too. Curtis stuck around a few more days, then hit the road. Said he had family he hadn't seen in years. I shook his hand longer than I should have. There aren't many people like him left. A week after he left, I walked the perimeter of my land. Just me, the wind, and the sound of gravel under my boots. At the back fence, near the old oak, I buried the photo they'd sent me. Not out of fear, out of finality. The land was mine again. Not just in name, in presence. But here's the truth. I never told anyone. They almost had me. Not physically, not legally, but emotionally. They made me doubt who I was. Made me question whether my past, my silence, my distance from the world had made me weak. But it didn't. It made me watchful. It made me ready. And when they came to take everything, they forgot one thing. You can buy land. You can fake a badge, but you can't counterfeit resolve. So if you're listening to this, whoever you are, know this. There's still a line in this world. And there are still men like me standing on it, waiting, watching. And when the next Jared Walton shows up with his polished shoes and sharpened lies, we'll be here, and we won't blink.